Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. It is an absolute pleasure to introduce you to Miss Heather Wright. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat box. Of course, there'll be other times when Heather will ask if you have direct questions, but feel free to add that to the chat box and stay muted while Heather is on the presentation until the end. Heather, it's a pleasure to have you. Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Jade, so much for having me today and for everybody that's on the call. And if those of you that are watching the replay, thank you for joining us today. And I am here to talk about some SMART goals of crafting measurable goals and objectives. And I am Heather Wright, and I am a special education advocate, IEP coach, consultant, whatever you want to call me. I'm the jack of all trades, I guess, in terms of that. But I wanted to share a little bit about me to start. Is that I have been in special education actually for almost 20 years at this point. I was mostly a middle school special education teacher. I did teach 1 or 2 years of elementary level. I was an instructional support teacher in a huge district in the Atlanta area. So I was basically a special ed admin at the middle school that I was working at. I also earned the title of Teacher of the Year in 2019, so right before COVID. And I have a master's degree in learning disabilities and behavior disorders. I love working with families that have children that have some behavior challenges. I'm also a COPA member, so that is the Council of Parents and Attorneys and Advocates. I also completed the Master IEP Coach Mentorship, and I do have a published IEP planner that you can find on Amazon. It is called the Yearly IEP Planner, A Parent's Guide. So just like Jade said, the chat is open. So if you hear something or have a question, please put your questions in the chat box, and I will stop periodically and give you any time to ask questions. Unmute yourself if you want to. Jade's going to help me monitor the chat because I can't see everything on my end. So let's get started. And here's your first question I'd like for you to put in the chat. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your understanding of SMART goals? So 1 being very minimal and 5 being advanced. Give me some feedback in that chat box and see where we are. I'll see if I can open that chat. Okay, Frances says 3, so right in that middle range. I'm going to say Shanna. Hopefully I said your name correctly, but she's like, I've got this. I'm good. Anybody else? So it sounds like we got quite a range of information. Kimberly is at a 3. She's roughly down the middle. Awesome. So what your outcomes are today, hopefully at the end of this training, you will understand the importance of well-written SMART IEP goals and objectives. We are going to identify components of a SMART goal, and we are going to learn strategies for developing SMART goals collaboratively with y'all's school teams. So hopefully by the end, we'll get those 3 outcomes and you'll have more information. So let's talk about what SMART goals actually mean. So SMART, the S in SMART is specific, M is measurable, A is achievable, R is relevant, and T is time bound. So if your goals and objectives in your child's IEP are not SMART or don't have all of these components, then they are not technically SMART goals. So let's look at a little bit further into why we have SMART goals. So SMART goals and objectives, and IDA definitely mandates the use of measurable goals. You won't see the word SMART in IDA law, but it does say that they need to be measurable annual goals, including academic and functional goals. And I just cited the regulation for you. So in case you ever needed that for your school teams, you can have that. And Jade, maybe if can you unmute for a second? If I share this presentation with you, will you be able to share it with the people that are on the call?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I'll make sure that I get Jade the PDF of this so you have it at the end and you can have it for reference. So measurable goals allow for objective data collection on student performance. So a lot of goals and objectives and IEPs that I see are very subjective. So there are lots of statements that say, I feel, I think, I like, they don't like. We need to focus it on objective. And objective data means that it is measurable. We can see it, we can feel it. We have a number component with it. We don't want the I feel statements, I think statements. We need the actual data to say, this is the amount that this child can do, or this is how many prompts that he or she requires. We need it to be measurable. SMART goals also align with best practices in special education. So they provide a clear framework for writing high quality instructional goals, and it also increases the accountability and helps guide those interventions and services. So there are many times that I read IEP goals and objectives, and it's so vague. I don't know who's taking the data on the goals and objectives. How is the goal and objective being measured? And when I ask school teams to be more specific, sometimes they look at me with the crazy eyes, but I'm like, we need to make sure that these are specific, objective, and making sure that there is an accountability piece, and SMART goals help us make sure that those are listed in the IEP. So let's talk a little bit about benefits of having SMART goals. The first thing I wanted to mention is that they focus on specially designed instruction. So specially designed instruction is the basis of special education, and that's the difference of an IEP versus a 504 plan. And that's another topic that, Jade, if we wanted to chat about that, we could make that training and workshop. But focusing on specialized instruction, so we're targeting the specific goals and skills and honestly the needs of the child. We also help make sure that the teachers have a plan for how the specially designed instruction, how they are teaching, is going to align to that goal and objective in the IEP. We want to make sure that they coincide. So the teaching and the goal and objective should be working together on making sure that data is collected accurately and we know exactly what a child's performance is. And I talked about this on the last slide, but objective progress monitoring. So we need to make sure that it's measurable. So we have a system for data collection. Make sure that it's measurable. How many times a child is doing certain things. If we're having the data collection piece, we're also making sure if the child is making expected progress. So caveat on that, this also can help with determining extended school year for your child. So if we have the raw data, we have the objective raw data, we can also help decide and determine if a child requires extended school year based on their progress on those goals and objectives. Like I said earlier too, it increases accountability. It creates clear goals and holds the team responsible for implementing interventions, what's being intervention, what the time frame is, when they're supposed to have mastered that goal and objective. Are they hitting their benchmarks by the specific criteria that's outlined in that objective? And then, of course, when are we reviewing progress, and do adjustments need to be made? So I was at an IEP meeting a couple weeks ago with a family because their child had made, more than expected progress, and we needed to change IEP goals and objectives. We were able to look at the data, updated present levels, and make some really good decisions based on that data that was collected. And then it also helps with improving your collaboration as a parent. So it helps understand, you are able to understand and facilitate that parent involvement, but you can also help reinforce those skills and track the progress at home. So making sure that you ask for those raw data samples that come along with your progress reports, and making sure that you get the draft documents prior to your IEP meeting so you can have meaningful input, and making sure you're submitting a parent input statement prior to the meeting. Those are all ideas and tips that will help you collaborate and help generate those SMART goals. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to make SMART goals, what it could look like, what present levels need to look like. I'm going to stop there for 1 second and see if there's any questions right now. I don't see any.
No questions yet, Heather. You're great.
All right, perfect. I'm going to keep going. So let's look at developing SMART goals. We need to, again, begin with comprehensive and objective present levels of performance. And sometimes in certain districts, you'll see PLOP, some districts you'll see PLAF. They're basically all the same thing, but that's an outline in your child's IEP of their strengths and needs. And that should include data from evaluations, observations, work samples. This is the big key. Your present levels of performance and goals and objectives should include baseline skills or baseline data. What does baseline data mean? So for instance, if I am a child working on addition and the team is proposing that we need to add a goal and objective for addition with regrouping, and they have a data sample and they say the baseline is at 20%, then that's the starting point of where I am on that goal and objective. That also helps drive the criteria of mastery on the overarching objective and goal. If I'm starting at a 20% and they say, okay, I need to get to 100, that's a huge gap between where I'm starting to where I need to get to in a year. So we need to make sure that we ask for baselines, and you as moms and dads and families ask for those baselines to be included in that progress on that goal and objective. Without it, you have no idea where your child is currently functioning to where they're supposed to go, and if that goal is measurable, attainable, and relevant. Maybe they already know how to do that skill, and you're like, why are we adding this as an objective in the IEP? So, all right, so I'm going to give you a minute or two, and I wrote a sample present level of performance. And in the chat box, you can kind of give me ideas of what do you see in this sample present level that might not be included in your present levels of performance for your child, and maybe how is it different? What are the things that pop out to you in this present level of performance? And of course, this is not comprehensive. It's just a sampling. But in the chat, can you tell me what you notice and what is specific about these present levels? Jade, is it able to be read on your side? I just want to make sure if I need to make it enlarge it.
Yeah, no, everything looks great. We're just waiting on some questions to come in.
So again, after you've read it, if you could put in the chat or even unmute yourself if you want to, what are things that stick out to you and that you notice about these present levels? Don't be shy, people. Don't be shy. Jade, can I ask you what you notice about these present levels of performance that maybe, I mean, I know that you have children and maybe you don't have children with an IEP, but is there something that you notice throughout these present levels that maybe would be a talking point?
Great question. I don't have kiddos with IEPs anymore. But I don't know. I think you'll need to tell us the answer to this because I'm questioning myself of, like with accommodating for small group testing. I don't know.
Yeah. So Christina said maybe it needs more samples to test progress. Okay. Absolutely. Maybe it does need to be. So I think, Christina, are you speaking of like the current IEP goal and objective where it says over 3 consecutive data collection periods? Is that what you're saying? Or are you looking at the 4 out of 5 samples? Can you unmute and just clarify what that comment was? If you're able to.
Okay, sorry. I've never unmuted before.
You're good.
Okay, I guess it said 4 to 5 samples across 2 consecutive data collection periods. I just thought maybe it needed more than 4 or 5 samples. Like, is 5 samples enough?
Right. And it could be. I thank you for sharing that information. So a lot of the times we are looking at specific samples. And I like whenever goals and objectives have more of a consistent consecutive data collection periods. So, excuse me, progress reports around my area, ones that I see most often, are every 9 weeks. They are sent home to you guys as moms and dads. So when we're looking at consecutive data collection periods, that could be over 2 9-week periods, so over a semester. So maybe it does need to be more than 4 out of 5 samples. Of course, for longer writing tasks, it might end up being less writing samples, because I know when I taught middle school, they were expected to write 5-paragraph essays. And we couldn't necessarily get 5-paragraph essays every week for data collection pieces, but we were able to break it down and scaffold it into, a 5-paragraph or a 5 sentences in a paragraph. So we might need to look at, do we need to have the correct number of data samples to be able to show progress, right? Because that's the goal. If you have one sample that has it at 85, but then there's no more samples that show it at 80 or 85%, then it's not showing consistent pattern of growth or non-growth. I also wanted to make sure that I pointed out that these present levels have a lot of objective numbers in it. So I see a lot of present levels of performance that just say, Johnny's doing well. He can add fractions and he participates in class and he is liked by his classmates. Well, that doesn't tell me a lot about Johnny. We need to be specific. So I also wanted to include that we should be looking at, and I say what accommodations are working and not working for your child, because I don't like when I see Cheesecake Factory menu of accommodations. And you all know what Cheesecake Factory menu looks like. I hope it's overwhelming. There's so many things to choose from. I can't figure out which cheesecake I want. And I just don't know. I feel like I'm throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping it sticks. So with objective present levels like the one that are on the screen, it gives you information that, is the accommodation working? Is it not working? Do we need to tweak it? And Shanna, hopefully I'm saying your name right, Shanna. You did say yes, it's very detailed. You want it to be detailed. You want it to be objective. You need to have that information. Again, when I said baseline data, this is all that information on that slide that gives you where a child is starting from to where they could go. If it's not here and we don't have a baseline, then how are we able to indicate that that's a need? And if it's not indicated in the present levels, then we can't justify why that child does have that goal and objective. I just recently started making the Cheesecake Factory menu, and I've had many people get the light bulb. I'm like, that's amazing. And I was like, yes, I love it. I love the Cheesecake Factory, but their menu is too much for me to handle. So let's look at what an example SMART goal looks like in terms of IEPs. Yes, Catherine, it'll be available. I think Jade has it recording, but you're also going to be able to get the PDF of my slideshow as well. So here's an example of a SMART goal, and I put the T, the S, and the R, the M, A. Those correlate with time-bound, specific, measurable, achievable. So it says by May 2024, that's your time-bound piece. That by May 2024, now of course that will change depending on when you have your child's IEP. So this goal and objective might have been given for an IEP that started May last year. So by the end of their whole year. When presented with a second grade reading passage, and again, this is specific. You're giving them a second grade reading passage. Now, why did we say second grade? This would come directly from their present levels, and where it says, this is what their instructional level is. I don't like when goals and objectives just say, when presenting with a reading passage at their instructional level. Well, as a teacher, as a former educator, I don't know what that is unless I go back and forth and back and forth. And there's so many things to misunderstand and so many this work sample, this data collection piece, this curriculum-based measurement, if we put it directly in the goal, then there is no room for lack of understanding. We're giving them the second grade reading passage. Crosby will be able to orally read 70 words correct per minute with 90% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials, as measured by a running record. And there's your measurable, there's your achievable. And again, that comes from your baseline, and I put it under in italicized, from a baseline of 70% with a fluency rate of 40 words correct per minute. If it said 0, then going from 0% to 90% would not be attainable. So we need to make sure that it's measurable and attainable as a goal and objective. This would be the overarching goal, and this would probably be broken down into specific objectives for this goal and this goal. So just keep that in mind, that we're talking about an overarching goal, and then you should have either some school teams do benchmarks, some do objectives, but it would be then broken down even further so that you can hit specific key parts at like by first 9 weeks or by X amount of dates within a couple month period. Here's a non-example. Crosby will improve his reading fluency from present levels of performance to stated criteria of mastery. I see this more often than I care to admit. It is not smart. It is too vague. What is his present levels of performance? What's the criteria of mastery? Where is his current fluency rate? And it's not measurable. We have no idea what he's supposed to get to from where he's supposed to be at. It's none of those things. This is too vague. It would not pass what I call my stranger test, in that a stranger couldn't pick up this IEP and implement this without having a lot of questions. They would have to do a lot of trial and error. They would have to go finding a lot of documents. This is not specific enough. It is too vague. Let's look at another one. After reading an informational text at her instructional level, and I just said that I hated it when it's written there, so we put next to that in parentheses, 5th grade. That's the instructional level that you're reading. She will identify the main idea and 2 supporting details by highlighting the relevant sentences, achieving a score of 16 out of 20, using a teacher's rubric in 8 out of 10 trials by May 15th. Now, keep in mind that SMART doesn't need to be in the exact order as of SMART. It can be, jumbled up. We just need to have all components in the goal and objective. You say, this might be a little bit wordy. It is, because it's an overarching goal, and what the benchmarks or the objectives will be, because again, when I'm looking at this goal, there are 2 skills. There's one that's identifying the main idea, and there's another one that is saying, we'll give you 2 supporting details. There should be, this is the overarching goal, overarching goal. And then 2 objectives. One objective should be identifying the main idea, and the other one is for supporting details. Now, why is that important? Does anybody want to share why that might be important to have 2 objectives for this goal? What are y'all thoughts on that before I give you the answer? Y'all are quiet this morning. I feel like it's a Monday morning. All right, I'll share with you. So when you get your progress reports and it might say progressing at 85%. Well, is that progressing at 85% on the main idea, or is that on the supporting details, or is that both? It gives me lots of questions to go, what do we really need to work on? And by breaking this goal into 2 objectives, we can see if Sarah is able to identify the main idea, or if she's not, and if she's able to give the supporting details. So then we're tailoring her present levels, we're tailoring her objectives on what she really does struggle with, and not, well, I think she's doing okay with both of those. We need to break it down and break those into 2 objectives. Do you have an example on this PowerPoint of the goal and objectives? So I don't necessarily have an objective for both of these, Kimberly, but I can add a slide at the very end of the presentation that gives kind of an example of what the goal would be and then what the 2 objectives would be. So I didn't include that, but I can when I send it out to Jade. So let me take a note of that. Good suggestion. All right, I got a note. I'll make sure I add that into the presentation for y'all. Okay, let's look at this non-example. Sarah will become an expert on identifying main ideas this year. Well, first of all, nobody's an expert on anything, really. It's not measurable, it's not time bound, and it's not achievable. You know, we're setting this child up for failure if we're saying she's going to be an expert. Well, how do we know she's an expert? We don't know that. We don't know if this is not even measurable. There's no time period. This year, is this school year? Is it this, academic year, calendar year? It is not measurable, not time bound, and it's not achievable. And we should not be writing objectives and goals like this. Now, we talked about how we can make goals and objectives and SMART goals collaboratively. So the first thing I suggested, and we chatted about this a little bit ago, is that you should be providing a parent input statement in advance of your IEP meeting. And I typically say between 7 and 10 days before your meeting. You want to make sure that you're identifying and sharing with the school team your concerns, your questions, and a lot of details about your child. So when parents work with me and they hire me to support them, I do help with parent input statements. It's a series of 10 questions that I give to a parent, and it's not just academically related. It's what do they like to do outside of school? What are their interests? What kind of supports are working at home? What supports are working at school? What kind of questions do you have? It really encompasses all of that. And you can include, for instance, if you are struggling or your child is struggling with a skill that you're like, I wish they could do this, or I wish the school team would work more on opening containers at school, and you don't see that in their IEPs, you can include that as a concern and ask the team to write some goals and objectives around that skill. That way, when you go to the meeting, you have good conversations. And I get tired of hearing, when I was a classroom teacher, parents would come and we would have meetings and all the things, and they would ask a question and I would go, I don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna have to get back to you. And I'm sure y'all have heard that plenty of times. I'm gonna have to get back to you with that answer. I don't know the answer. And not saying that you can't ask questions at the meeting, but if you have specific questions that you have been losing sleep over, or they've been on your mind for a month or 2 months, ask them ahead of time so that the school team has the opportunity to get you those answers and have that discussion at the meeting. A second strategy for developing SMART goals collaboratively is if you have any outside reports from service providers or evaluation reports, submit those ahead of time. If that needs to be discussed, and maybe your child's ABA therapist or child's private occupational therapist is seeing this, or speech therapy, then again, that information from what's being worked on outside of school is important for what can be also worked on inside of school, and how we can collaborate and work together to achieve what y'all's outcomes are for your child. Number 3 is a big one. Request the draft documents that are going to be discussed at least 3 days before the meeting. That includes proposed goals and objectives. That includes raw data samples. That includes the draft IEP. That includes any assessments. So if your child's in the evaluation process, any of those assessment reports, you should have the same information that the school team has. It is not fair to you as a mom or a dad, grandparent that comes into a meeting and you feel blindsided by a report or a document. By getting that document and documents ahead of time, you get to ask questions and take your own notes. How many of you guys get draft documents? Do you get those? I hope you do. It's not, I'm glad that Kimberly does. And Christina does get hers too. Do you have to request them, or do they automatically send them to you? You request them, good. In the state of Georgia, Oh, Christina, they automatically send them. That's great. Hopefully you're getting them at least a few days before and not the night before the meeting. There is no statute for receiving draft documents in the United States. Certain states have their own set of regulations. I believe California, they are required to send them 5 days before, but in the state of Georgia, there is no requirement. So school teams do not have to send you draft documents. So it is important that you put in writing your request to receive those draft documents. I say at least 3 days before. You might request them, 7 days before, whatever that looks like. And make sure that you're also getting the raw data samples. So raw data samples correlate with the progress reports, but it is the actual data, the objective data that shows how the progress report was calculated. So if the percentage on that progress report was 75%, there should be data collection or raw data samples to show this is where that 75% came from. If you're not receiving those raw data samples, again, put in writing that you are requesting those. Another tip is we are about 30 days before the end of the school year, and y'all should be getting your final year-end progress report here at probably the last day of school, but it might be mailed to you after the last day of school. You should be asking for those raw data samples with that progress report within the next couple weeks. Don't wait until the middle of May. I would suggest writing that on your calendar, like by May 1st, you email your child's case manager and your child's school team and ask for those raw data samples if you're not already getting those. And then the last one I think is also important is keep a journal of talking points that you want to share with the school team, because life gets busy. We think, oh, I'll remember to share that with the school team, and then you don't, you forget. Keep it as on a note on your phone or a handheld. I'm a phone person. I want my notes on my phone. I don't want a paper pencil for that. But you should document any of your concerns, observations, any areas that you see as a need that arise during the school year. Maybe it's social skill deficits, maybe problematic behaviors, maybe it's supports for homework, maybe it is medical, medical care that you're seeing this and this, or any updated information from medical teams that you need to share with the school team on that. It just keeps your brain hopefully a little less structured. So whenever you're getting to that IEP meeting or when you're drafting your parent input statement, you do have all the information with you. All right, what questions do we have so far? I know I talked a lot. We are ahead of time, actually. But what questions do you guys have? And it could be related to SMART goals, but it could be related to IEPs as well. Christina, I'm so glad that they send you the draft documents ahead of time. Do you also get raw data samples with those too?
No, I need to start working on that. I never get the raw data, but
well, and school teams will typically send it unless you request it as well.
okay, I will ask for it.
Yes. What about you, Kimberly? You request the documents. Do you get the raw data with your draft documents?
I request them.
Okay, and they have a problem. Did they send them to you?
Yes.
No problem. Awesome. Catherine says we also get them ahead of time and raw data. Okay, that makes my heart happy and sings all the praises, because you don't know where your child is if you don't have the raw data to look at it. And I've been in plenty of meetings that it looks great. The progress report says progressing or mastered. And then when we actually get the raw data to analyze it, it's not actually progressing, or we see that maybe there was an inconsistency of data collection being taken, or there was, data collected in October, but another data collection wasn't happening until January. And those help guide those questions of why was data collection not taken, or how did you get 75% when I calculated it to be 25%? It's super important. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, is this Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's more in reference to, say, for instance, my son, he has an AAC device.
Yes.
And wanting to ensure that like the AAC device is accessible to him throughout the entire day versus during the times that, they're working directly with him.
Okay.
So is it no I don't know, say if is it normal or is it something that can be provided to the team as far as like, or can you provide stuff to the team that shows like, hey, this should be accessible and these are the reasons why? So like, I don't want to say a study per se, but like a speech therapist saying like, it's best for him to have this all day versus just the time that you're working with him.
I would
So they
absolutely.
may not know that, but is there, I mean, is it possible? No, I'll say is it possible, but is it something that you can normally do where you can kind of provide them with some documentation to say this is the best way for him to learn to use the AAC device?
Yes, I've actually had clients that have done that. We do that in parent input a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, if it is a concern of yours that your child is using that AAC device or has it accessible to him, right? And quite honestly, why wouldn't it be? And I say that is like there's multiple opportunities throughout the day that he could be communicating, not just at a small group with a teacher. But I put that as a concern in the parent concern section of the IEP and that parent input. And then I would say, here's some attached documentation that supports why it is important that a child uses their AAC device or has it readily available throughout the day. And that way it's documented and in the IEP. And that also is a talking point that it could also go probably under supports for school personnel and under accommodations that his AAC device is with him all day and having the opportunity. And if the teachers need trained on that AAC device, because, and I say all teachers, so special ed teachers might know how to use it, but you can also add training for all teachers and staff that come into contact with him to be trained on that device too, because that could be a roadblock, is that some teachers don't know how to use it. So they're just like, well, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to give it to him to use. So you can also add training in there for teachers.
Yeah, I did at the beginning of the year requested the AAC department go to the school and train the teachers. I don't know how much they truly train them, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I guess, my concern too is because I do know that my son at times he stems using the device. So that's just like possibly him pressing the same thing over and over again. And I think at times teachers don't realize that them taking it away because he's doing that is actually more detrimental. Like it's not, that's just like if he were to actually say the words over and over again, you're actually just taking away his voice. So was just curious as to how that is normally put into the IEP. And I see
Yeah.
someone has theirs where it says it's available.
And yeah, absolutely. And I believe who wrote this, is it's Catherine that wrote this comment.
Yes.
Um, absolutely can put it under the accommodations. I'm sure, Catherine, is that where it says it's in your under accommodations that his AAC device will be on his desk, or even under assistive technology, wherever they put that device is where it is. Because once it's in the IEP, it needs to be followed. And you can also, some devices have a record of how often the device has been used. So maybe, I don't know what device he uses, but you might be able to see if there is a record of how often he's using it during the day. And you can also ask the school team to include when the training was happening for the staff. So August, and then maybe another one in January. You can include that in the IEP as well.
Okay, awesome.
Yep. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Catherine, Francis says that theirs is under accommodations and student supports. Absolutely. That's typically where it's put. And then you can also put it under assistive technology as well. And speech. Yes, because I'm assuming, Catherine, that your child has a speech and language goal to use their communication device. Or that's part of the goal and objectives that are in there. Good questions, though. Absolutely. Yes. So I wanted to give you some information on how to keep in touch with me. So I am local to the Atlanta area. I actually live in North Cumming. If you visit my website, I do offer a free 30-minute consultation. I do support families inside of meetings, outside of meetings, but you can also find an opportunity to download a concerns letter template. So maybe, oh, yay, thanks Kimberly for following me. On my website, you can download the free concerns letter template. So maybe it's not that you have an annual IEP coming up, but you do have a concern that you want to address with the school team before an annual review coming up. So that's where you can draft that template, use that. I've had a lot of success with families, and I tell you that template is what I use. And of course, I alter it a little bit depending on the family that I'm supporting and their needs, but I've had much success with families downloading that template and filling in their own information in there, whether you have me in your back pocket or not. My email address is hwright.consultant@gmail. And if you follow me on Facebook and Instagram, it's at Heather Wright Consultant. I'm definitely on there as much as possible. I was talking to Jade earlier about that I don't like social media that often. It just gets to be a rabbit hole, but I do share resources, tips, tricks. If I find resources in the community, programs, respite opportunities, summer camps, social skills groups, parent groups, I share all of that out there, food for thought. So follow me on social media if you need to. If you're like, I just don't know if I need support from you, it doesn't hurt to give that free 30-minute consultation. We talk about your 3 top concerns, and then I follow up with an email about what that looks like for working with me. And there's, like I tell people, I can't sell ice to anybody living in Alaska, so I'm not a true salesman on that side. Catherine says, I ended up having a meeting with a deaf and speech teacher to help them, and it was more beneficial and helpful for them to learn from me than someone else. Yeah, and sometimes you as a mom, you know your child and you know the device better than what the school team has. And I love that you went in and trained some of those staff members on that. But make sure that you absolutely can get training from the school team at no cost to you. And you also can get training for yourself on some of those devices. If it's a new device or a new program, or you need to know how to use certain things, you can also get the training for yourself as well. Okay, so I think on my list, I have add a slide for the specific objectives based on the overarching goal. So I will work on that and get that to you guys. And I just wanted to lastly say thank you to Jade and Focus for having me today. And thank you for all of you that are on the call today. I truly appreciate you being here. And if you have questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And if you do follow me on social media, like and share my posts, get that free consult scheduled, or download that template. Oh yeah, you guys got camp this weekend. So exciting about that.
Yes, Heather, thank you so much. And thank you for giving us your information to contact you. If anyone has any last minute burning questions, now would be the time to ask Heather, as we have her full attention this morning. But Heather, we just can't thank you enough for just helping our families walk through this event, and hopefully being able to contact you at another time and check in when parents need help with their IEPs. So we have a lot of parents saying thank you.
And you
And
guys,
of course, Heather, if you have a burning desire to come visit us at family camp this weekend, you're more than welcome. We're there. We do all the fun stuff. So
I mean, I'm excited for family camp. That sounds like fun to be fun. I also
Kimberly said that she does have another question. So Kimberly,
right.
go ahead.
Put me on the hot seat, Kimberly. I got you.
Okay. So in reference to like compensatory time.
Yes, ma'am.
So that has definitely been something that I have been requesting at each IEP meeting that we've had so far this year. And so we're supposed to discuss it again. The LTSC was supposed to get with, I guess, the speech, the person who's over speech, to calculate how much time he's
Okay.
missed this year.
Okay.
Because I've, specifically requested for it to be, of course, minute for minute. I know they say they don't want to do that typically, but it's not our fault that he missed it. It's the school district's fault.
Right.
But he also missed OT. Is OT something that can be requested for compensatory time, or because it's more of a support
So tell
service, it can that be?
OT, does he see like, is it direct services that he was being seen by or should have been seen by an OT?
Yes, they were coming, or the OT was coming out. And then the OT that he had retired in January,
Mhm.
there was supposed to be another OT that was supposed to be coming, and then they, being short-staffed, didn't have him, and he didn't have OT for over a month.
Okay.
Um, and so that person didn't come out. There was no one that came out.
Okay. So you
He comes
absolutely
out once a week, I think, for 30 minutes.
Okay, so you absolutely could request the compensatory services for OT, but what I would tell you to do to make sure that you're just not asking it without having data to back it up is they're going to look at where was your son at before services stopped, and then where was he at when services had started again, to see was there some regression in that area and the educational impact. So if you have that information that he missed, let's say 5 hours of OT, I'm not sure what that is. Where was the progress not being made on those goals and objectives that the OT supported? You'll want to have all of that with you when you ask for compensatory services for that area as well. But yes, you can ask for it.
So would that be, I guess, more so in the raw data, or would that be like where, I guess, how would
Yeah,
I get that
you can
information? I
look.
know I've noticed that his tracing
Mhm.
has, regressed,
And
but
you might not necessarily have the raw data on the goals and objectives from his IEP, but clearly you have data from just him working on tasks in class,
so
right?
his like homework could be
Yes,
something like it show something
right.
from before and something more recent and show the
Yes.
comparison of how.
Yes, I would use that information to say this is where he was before. He missed this amount of time with OT who was supporting X, Y, and Z goal and objective. And this is the gains that he didn't make. So whether it's regression or he didn't make the expected progress that we would expect to see over that period of time. And ask for
I
that.
probably would need to set up a meeting with you, because I'm also wondering though, like, so with the speech, he hasn't had speech at all this year. So at this point, he is at, I have it calculated, I think he's at like 30 hours.
Yeah, and
And so there's nothing to identify. There's nothing to show like he was here and now he's here. He literally just has not had it.
well, and that's
And he's nonverbal. So
and clearly there's not data to have it because he wasn't being received services. So I can't imagine that the school is going to deny compensatory services for speech when I'm assuming that there was not a service provider available at the school at that point. And whether there's not a service provider, there needs to be an alternative method. Now, does he get private speech therapy?
I do take him to private.
Okay. Have you considered, and this is just an option, have you presented the team that because he didn't have a speech therapist at school that is potentially your private speech therapist could provide some of those supports and services?
I've provided them with that option. I've provided them with several options.
Okay.
His LTSC just does not, she's not, yeah. Actually talked to the director of
Okay.
our district, because I'm like, this is ridiculous. They offered us some options and they just weren't feasible. Like one of them was going to this particular speech therapist, which is like an hour away from us. The other one was doing it virtually at home, like after hours, where I'm like, he has other services that he does. And then the other one was like 2 Saturdays a month. But then once I was like, okay, well, we'll look into possibly doing that, it was full. So we couldn't do any of the options anyway. So
Yeah, it does get to be a little schedule conflicting sometimes, trying to make it all work, and it's a lot. But make sure that if they're denying your request that you get a prior written notice as well.
yes.
Of the reasons that they're denying that. So you have that in writing and that you're trying to be forthcoming. But yes, if you want to schedule a consultation, we can chat more about your specific needs about that. But yes, you can ask for compensatory services about what that looks like. And it is what your child requires, not just, oh, everybody's going to get this amount of time. That's not what it should look like either.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Anybody else? I know there's only a couple of us left on the call. Stephanie, Francis, Rashida, And Jade, of course, is on the call too. I know we were earlier and finished up earlier than ahead of time. So hopefully you'll enjoy the gift of time. I know I always appreciate whenever I can take a little extra time for myself. And I appreciate you guys being on the call today. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, email, website, Instagram, or Facebook. I'm a little bit more prevalent on Instagram than I am on Facebook, but I do check both of those and get your consultation scheduled if you'd like to, or at least download that free template so you at least have it in your back pocket, that if you're like, I need a little bit more force behind what I'm asking for and the school team's not listening, this will get that moving in the right direction for you. But thank you so much, Jade, for having me today, and for everybody that's on the call. And if you're not here in person or on live and you're watching the replay, thank you so much. And I will get that PDF to you, Jade, probably this afternoon, so you can share that with the participants. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather, so much. And anyone
Thanks.
interested in Heather's recorded workshop today, it'll be up at least by the end of the week on our recorded workshops webpage, where you can obviously find all sorts of resources for families. But Heather, we appreciate you and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye, guys.